Today's show is sponsored by the Pittsburgh Opera, presenting the world premiere of Woman with Eyes Closed. Here's what you need to know. There's this gal named Mona. She realizes her son is an art thief who has stashed stolen paintings in her house. So she's got a decision to make. Does she give them back to the museum? Does she keep them? Does she turn her son in? Or does she destroy the evidence? This is all based on a real-life art heist, and Woman with Eyes Closed will keep you guessing until the very end. There are 5 performances, April 26th through May 4th. Learn more at pittsburghopera.org/woman. This episode is supported by Perico Gardens. Jens, I bought a house a couple of years ago, my very first, and I've mostly spent that entire time ripping out all the old, half-dead shrubs to give myself and my yard a blank slate. But now I don't know what to do. If you are like me and you maybe need a little help getting started, you might try Perico Gardens. They're a garden design service here in Pittsburgh geared toward new homeowners and anyone who needs a little more expertise to get their garden going. They check out your yard. They give you personalized recommendations for anything you want: trees, shrubs, flowers, and more. Visit pericogardens.com to book your own design consultation. Today on CityCast Pittsburgh. It is the second installment in our month-long Mayoral Monday series. We're asking all 4 men vying to be Pittsburgh's mayor why they think they are the best person to lead us right now. Today, I'm with Corey O'Connor, who's running against an incumbent mayor in the city's Democratic primary. O'Connor currently serves as Allegheny County Controller and was on city council for over a decade. He's also the son of the late Mayor Bob O'Connor. It's Monday, April 21st. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh is talking about.
Hey there, it's executive producer Mallory Falk here with some big news. We are kicking off our spring membership campaign today, including a fresh new name that we think describes our members' dedication to Pittsburgh. So CityCast Pittsburgh members are now CityCast Pittsburgh neighbors. We think this name really embodies the people who support the show, and it couldn't be more perfect in the land of Mr. Rogers. But it is not just a new name. We are also expanding membership benefits. CityCast Pittsburgh neighbors will continue to get ad-free podcast listening and an exclusive weekly email full of event recommendations. But you'll also get invitations to special neighbors-only events. Plus, you'll get to submit your favorite local businesses and organizations to be featured on the show and in the Hey Pittsburgh newsletter. We are especially excited about doing more events because it's always so great to connect with you, our listeners, in person. We're actually hosting our first neighbors-only event next month. So if you want to hang out with the team and fellow listeners in an extra intimate setting, consider this an extra push to become a CityCast Pittsburgh neighbor today. To learn more about what it means to be a CityCast Pittsburgh neighbor, visit membership.citycast.fm. As a special thank you, anyone who becomes a CityCast Pittsburgh neighbor during our spring campaign will get a neighbor-exclusive coffee mug. I got a sneak peek of these, and they are very cute. They're sort of diner style. It'll definitely become your go-to mug. By becoming a CityCast Pittsburgh neighbor, you'll get all these great perks, and you'll be supporting the work we do every day to bring you important stories about our city, like our Mayoral Monday series. If you find value in this kind of coverage, where you get to hear from each candidate at length instead of just sound bites, become a neighbor today. You can see the full list of benefits and sign up to become a CityCast Pittsburgh neighbor at membership.citycast.fm.
I'm downtown with Corey O'Connor. Thanks for joining us here on CityCast Pittsburgh.
No, thanks for having me.
So tell me, you're running for mayor. What do you think the city's biggest challenge is right now?
There's a lot. But, first, I think it's a growth conversation. I mean, if you look at our stagnant growth, and right now we seem to be managing decline instead of looking at growth. And if you go to our next census, we're probably going to be under 300,000 people, which is scary.
I don't know. They've been saying that for 2 or 3 years now, and we're still hovering right above that line.
It's close. But I think that's the reason to run. Somebody with a growth mentality that we can get. We don't have to worry about falling under 300,000 people. And it's funny when you go and you tell people, Pittsburgh might be under 300,000. We used to compete with Cleveland and Columbus. Mm-hmm. Toledo has 270,000. That's where we've come over the last couple of years, as we've fallen so far. And I think that's what I would bring to that office, a new mentality of growth and opportunity all around us. When people see vacant lots, vacant storefronts in neighborhoods, I look at that as opportunity. And we have to have somebody that's leading with that type of vision. And right now we just don't have it. So growth is number one. Then if you go to public safety, obviously, the carousel of chiefs of police is scary for a lot of people. And I'm sure we can get into that in a few minutes. But then it also comes down to you have ambulances and equipment that we were not investing in, and they're breaking down. Those are the vital equipment that we need to save lives. And ambulances break down to and from calls now. That means you're not steering the ship correctly at this point.
So those are challenges. What's the biggest opportunity in your mind?
I think it's sort of the same thing. Is you have space. You have the ability to bring in, new companies. You have the ability to expand companies that are already here. And when you look at housing, you have opportunity to build new affordable units. And we're just not doing that aggressively enough. And I think that's where the mayor's office really steps up to say, hey, here's 2 acres here. How do we make this work? What can we do with the vacant lots that we own? We own 11,000 parcels. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that we have to start talking about, is reusing our space for the greater good of the neighborhoods.
When you talk about growth, in the circles that you're in, what do you mean exactly by that? So there's city population. That's one way to measure it. What other ways are you thinking about that?
I think it's a metric. Yeah, I think it's businesses. New businesses, but also the small ones and the businesses that we have expanding. We have so many startups and robotics companies here, but we don't even talk to them. Why is that not the mayor's job to talk to them each and every day? And say, hey, how can you expand in Pittsburgh? How can you create more jobs within the neighborhood? Do you need more space? Hey, here's space available on the south side or the north side. And I think that's where we're really lacking in a vision to talk to the people that are already here and amplify the opportunities that they have. The one thing I love talking about that nobody talks about is in the South Hills of not only the city, but parts of the county, you had last year 40 new businesses created by our immigrant population. Why is that not on a commercial talking about Pittsburgh and the region? Instead, we see, the same old commercials about, oh, we're not a steel town anymore, we're this. Well, wait, why don't we actually get to the root of what we actually are?
Who should be making those commercials? Is this like a tourism thing? Or?
It's the same commercials you see. And when you watch a Steeler game and it cuts to commercial, it's the same, pictures of the same
you're running
anchors.
Commercials right now. You could blast that message if you want to.
And we are. And that's the biggest thing. And I think that's why we have been interviewing people and talking to people in the neighborhoods to say, look, this is Pittsburgh. This is where we are. How can we expand and get better? And we're just not seeing that right now. Especially when we have a national stage coming next year with the draft. That should be the commercial. We shouldn't see the same old Pittsburgh. We need to start selling ourselves at what opportunities we actually provide for people when they are looking at new cities to locate their company, their families, or just to buy a house. And I think those are the simple things that we can do. But without leadership or a vision to do it, you're going to have the same old.
So walk me through that vision then. You've got the draft coming up, but that's not for a little while. There's a lot of construction projects, especially downtown, taking place to try to pretty the place up for the company. What do you want to do other than door knocking with, startups and others? What do you want to do to try to grow and bring people in, or maybe use that week to say, hey, it's really cool here. It's pretty.
I also think that's the problem. If you said to me right now, what's the existing mayor's, what's their plan for Monday after the draft? There is none. I don't want a ticket. For me, I'd rather walk around the crowd and talk to people about, hey, you're from Denver, you're from Cleveland. What do you like about Pittsburgh? What didn't you know about Pittsburgh? We don't need $6 million planning studies to do that kind of work. That's the mayor's job, to hear from the people that are visiting, but also hear from the people that already exist in our city and what they need. But that $6 million that was spent on a citywide study from outside contractors, that didn't help anybody. It's going to this. We all know what studies do. Studies come back and say, "Oh, we spent your $6 million. In order to do this, we need 50 million more." It's like, okay, well, we don't have that. We didn't even have the 6 to give you for that project. So for me, it's really investing in people. So take that $6 million and put it into 2 intersections in small business districts, in neighborhoods that haven't seen growth or opportunity in a long time. Imagine what you could do with $3 million on an intersection. You could really change the tide and the momentum in that community. And instead it went to a New York, contractor to tell me what I already know, that, Greenfield and Garfield are different neighborhoods. And I think that's what's very frustrating about what we're seeing happen to our city.
And for folks who are not familiar with your background, you are the current county controller. You spend a lot of time looking at efficiency and money and how much we spend, particularly with contractors. I've heard you talk a lot about that on the county side. What do you think for folks that already live here? Because that's a lot of what we're seeing is the suburbs are growing all around Pittsburgh because people leave the city for a variety of reasons. But particularly with our school district, when you have school-age kids, a lot of people tuck tail and they run. What would you do about that?
Oh, definitely. And that was actually the first agenda item that we put out. Our first policy was to talk about youth and families. And, I have a 3.5 and an almost 2-year-old. And, for us, we're lucky to have childcare, but a lot of parents don't.
It's incredibly difficult.
It's incredibly difficult.
I was on a list for a year. There was a producer sitting in this room that's been on a list for a very long time.
So I have a room that I have a captive audience on this one. Yes. Well, when I was on council for 11 years, we actually put aside, when we did the Housing Opportunity Fund, we actually put aside a couple $1 million for early childhood. And that was for capital. So and I'll just use a little example. Okay, I run a childcare center and I need a new fence in the backyard. If I get a fence in the backyard of this building, then I can add 4 more children. And I think that's the type of capital that we have to invest to expand childcare. And I would love to do that project again and expand it. But then also look at our rec centers. Our rec centers still are run like they are in the 70s.
They all have like senior center vibes, even when they're not senior centers.
But senior centers are great. I go to them all the time, and they're great
fantastic.
locations.
I'm not.
Yeah, right.
No poo-pooing of the senior centers. They're wonderful.
I love my
but
senior
I think
centers.
They are different spaces.
But they are. Yeah, there's a senior center, but then there's also space within the gym. Let's just use that as an example. So why are we not looking at our rec centers to open from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. in the morning? Because we know both parents work jobs nowadays. So where are the kids going before school? And if you can ease the burden on families to say, hey, this is something that's going to benefit you right down the street in your community. You have to be at work at 8:15. How can we get a safe space to drop your kids off? We get them food, then the school bus picks them up and takes them to school. I mean, that's the type of simple coordination that we should be doing and we should be providing.
And you think the mayor's office should be leading?
Yeah, we run the rec centers. For our rec centers to not even be open on Saturdays for open gym, and I get this all the time, and it's frustrating. Well, we're going to have open gym, and kids are going to go in there, and what happens if they break a window? They're kids, so we fix the window. But I think that's the problem. We don't invest in our youth and give them opportunities to succeed at the buildings that already currently exist. And then you take it even further. We don't have a real partnership with our schools right now.
Yeah, most of your predecessors have taken, I'm generalizing here, but a little bit of a hands-off approach with the school system.
We're going right into the schools. We have to. That's the way that we're going to grow, and it comes down to schools, and that's how you're going to extend families and keep them here longer. But let's take schools, for example. They have gyms that aren't available to us on weekends, on evenings, where you can get a small nonprofit to teach a science class. Talk to the Science Center, who are great partners, but push it a little bit further. Even the Children's Museum, can they teach an art class for us on a Thursday night in a West End? I think that's where there's a lack of vision and a lack to ask. And I think coming from city council for 11 years, and now, as you said, being the controller, seeing where there's ways, seeing where we could bridge gaps in order to grow our region. But let's take the schools even further. A lot of them have swimming pools that on weekends aren't being used. And if I am elected mayor, I would have an aquatics team that teaches kids how to swim. Why are we not opening those school pools up on weekends for city parks to teach kids how to swim? Like those are creative uses of space and our time. And it's something that puts us at the forefront of looking at rec and in a different light. And we don't even have those conversations anymore.
Have you talked to the superintendent about any of this?
Not yet. I mean, I've met the person.
Yeah,
but no,
yeah.
I have not.
I just wonder if there's any enthusiasm.
Yeah, I mean,
for
I've talked to some
stuff.
school board members when you're out on the campaign trail, but, I think, it's a prime time to actually have a detailed conversation about how this is going to work. And that's my intent, obviously, hopefully win, but you have those conversations, say, look, this is what the city needs. And you have to be a partner at this point because we're both losing population. You're losing it in your schools.
And they're consolidating and looking at closing a lot of schools, which is also not a super popular position right now, especially for parents and families.
Right. And then you go to the other part of that is you're going to go from 52 to 40. We don't know which schools they are at this point. It was proposed, but they're suggestions. But then also, what are we going to do with those 12 vacant buildings? We know that the schools sit on these properties for way too long.
Years and years.
Way too long. So for me, as a partner, what can I do with those properties as the city? Are there economic opportunities to turn them into light manufacturing, housing, additional housing immediately? And you can't let these buildings sit and deteriorate because they get even worse. So for me, that's part of the conversation. You want a partnership. What are you going to do with these 12 buildings that are going to sit in neighborhoods and do nothing? We need to get those buildings, continue to have those buildings be active. And those are going to be difficult conversations, but the mayor's the one that has to lead this conversation. And you have to be upfront with the schools to say, look, here's the partnership. You're either on board or you're not, but you should be on board because we can create a great partnership that grows this region and keeps families here.
A lot of the things that you're talking about, they sound great. They will take a little bit of money and a lot of planning. And
do you need money? Yeah, I think you need
some
money.
of that's like strategy based, right? Like you need humans figuring out how to connect the dots to get all of this stuff done. Those are salaries. How would you describe Pittsburgh's financial position right now?
Right now, they are sleepwalking into a financial crisis, and they know that. I mean, even look at their first quarter numbers that are probably going to be out in the next couple of weeks. This year's budget was held together by Band-Aids. They know it. They're not being transparent with where the money actually is. You took $340 million of COVID money and you went out like other cities who were smart, went out, bought more vehicles for their fleet, demoed properties, had shovel-ready sites all across this region. That's what we could have done. What we did instead was hire our political friends who now next year we can't pay those salaries because the COVID money is gone.
Are you talking about the 100 positions,
100 positions added to the budget? Yeah. And where's that money coming from? And let's say, it comes out to $10 to $15 million, maybe even more, depending on whose salaries they are. Where are you coming up with that $15 million? You don't have any money for it because the COVID money's gone. So you were not actually planning a city of the future. You were planning to hire all your political friends and then come back to the taxpayers and say, hey, here's a bill, we have to pay it now. That's not being transparent with our funds. Even when you look at their overtime numbers for police, as well as fire, EMS, and public works, we know they're exceeding that number already. And that's only 4 months into this year. So how are you going to even fill your gap to pay off your annual budget? You can't.
We've talked to Mayor Gainey about that as recently as we're recording this as a few days ago. And he said, we budgeted for a set amount of overtime. We're like, yeah, but that's not enough, right? And yes, the answer was we know that's already not going to be enough. How would you try to save or make the city some money?
So, I mean, first you look at the mayor's office. There's no reason you have, no disrespect to the comms people here, but you don't need 8 communications people in the mayor's office.
We are a lean team. We value efficiency here at CityCast.
Right. But it's also, look at how the mayor's office went from $2 million to over $5 million, I believe it is now. That's $3 million that again, we know it's political friends. You can't do that stuff because that bankrupts a city. And that's how we went into bankruptcy. You showed no growth, which he's showing in his 5-year budget. And it's not just on real estate taxes. He's actually showing there's no earned income tax that's going to grow, which means he doesn't believe we're going to grow jobs in this region. How are you going to lead Pittsburgh when you're not creating jobs? That's a separate conversation. But so you show debt, but you do that to go into Act 47. You go on a hiring spree, which they just did. And then you also take on additional debt, which they are also doing. So how are you going to grow? So for me, it's going back to the empty promises that we heard from our nonprofits, the larger nonprofits who have to pay their fair share. He comes out with press conferences. Oh, we talked. Oh, wait, no, they won't meet with me. Like every day it's a different story. And we all know it's just a big lie. You sit down with those nonprofits and you say, here within your mission, and we'll use the hospitals for example first. Within your mission, your job is to keep people safe and get them to hospitals.
We're talking about like UPMC and Allegheny Health.
Yeah, Allegheny Health. For them, my ask would be, I need ambulances. Purchase me ambulances because it falls within your mission. You could even go further to say, what about plow trucks in the wintertime? We need somebody, the streets have to be clear to get to the hospitals.
So instead of like a standard payment in lieu of taxes, you're thinking
you go directly within their mission to save us capital, because then that frees up my resources. Then you go to the universities and, and again,
Pitt
this
and
is
CMU
Pitt,
are the
CMU, Duquesne, even Point Park. What can we do together that's going to save me capital so I can invest in something that's going to benefit your universities, but take it off of my tax rolls? And I think those are the creative ideas that you have to have. What this mayor wants to do is, well, he hasn't gotten a pilot. He hasn't gotten a dollar. He's actually lost us $100,000 in his challenges.
Talking about how much it costs to take some of these things to court and then
take them to court and go through the whole process. And, that's great. And we all said, hey, look, go for it, Mayor. But once you've lost us over hundreds of thousands of dollars, change course, because your course is losing money instead of gaining money.
Is there a dollar figure that you would look for from, we call them the big four?
I think there's others that you would go to, but yeah, I mean, I think you kind of pin down what your capital needs are. What is in my budget? What are my capital figures? Where can somebody help alleviate some of that stress? And I think you have to go, and Mayor Peduto actually had a deal. I mean, Mayor Peduto had an agreement.
He's the closest.
He's the closest. He had one PGH, and it was $100 million plus dollars. And Mayor Gainey said, no, we're not going to take your $100 million, which, again, why not? Why are we not talking about, if you didn't like the strategy of one PGH, build off of it then. You had the money, build off of it for a future. You didn't do that. Instead, again, taxpayers have now lost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. I mean, what leverage do you think you might have in the mayor's office if you're successful to have these conversations?
I mean, I think as the leader of the region, you come with a clear-cut vision to say, look, everybody in this city and in this region are partners. How can we partner to actually get something accomplished? And, we can fight on certain issues as everybody does, but the reality of it is who's equipped to sit down, negotiate for the taxpayers, and win for Pittsburgh. And that's what you have to go in there to do.
But I got to imagine Murphy, your dad, Ravenstall, Peduto, Gainey, they have all probably had a very similar conversation. Why do you think you would be able to be the one to get it done? Because
I don't think they've ever been, and we actually had one for a while. It wasn't a lot. It was $5 million through Murphy.
It was before my time, but my sense of it is that there was a lot of fussing because it wasn't what anyone thought was fair.
Yeah, it went, I forget when it went away. Yeah. Luke was the mayor, because I was on council voting on the pilot for a couple of years. But then since, I think there was a lawsuit and then a big fight. Yeah. So as the mayor, you go with a specific request. Right now, we don't see that. And we know that larger nonprofits, especially in the university community, how are they going to say, hey, your son or daughter's tuition is this number because we're bailing out Mayor Gainey and his debt in the city. That's why your tuition's so high. It doesn't work that way. But if you said to them, hey, that trail behind CMU's campus and Pitt's campus, let's even use Panther Hollow Bridge. When's it going to open? Pitt and CMU, that's a corridor to connect your universities. Do you mind chipping in $3 million? Again, using general numbers. Do you mind using $3 million to help us fix this bridge? Why are you not asking those questions? Those are simple questions that impact both universities, and they're willing to invest in this region, but yet nobody's asking. And I think that's the difference. I will go in with direct questions and direct asks.
And, one of the things that Mayor Gainey has talked about in recent months, as some of this he's been talking more about UPMC maybe not coming to the table in the way that he thought they would. He said lawsuits are potentially on the table. That's another thing that's been tried several times. Is that something that you would imagine you would try straight out of the gate?
No, I mean, he still has one out there, and it's not even UPMC. I think it's parcel challenges still, and look, we all said
challenging their nonprofit status, saying that they're bringing in revenue in a way that's not true
I mean,
to the nonprofit spirit legally.
I don't know what he's talking about. Another lawsuit that happened under Ravenstall, that lawsuit, but again, it just shows that there's no actual vision for Pittsburgh. And you've had 4 years. How have you not sat down with all the nonprofits in a room? Oh, well, they canceled
he said they have.
His excuse was, well, now they've canceled meetings. They all work here. How hard is it to meet at, let's all meet at Market Square and sit down and talk? Like, all of those companies are located here. Why are we not having these conversations? Yeah.
So you argue we're teetering on the brink. What would you imagine you would try to do to change that quickly? Like, what's the 100-day plan? I
think right away it's got to be a pilot. You got to get that done.
Okay, so
immediately.
Pilot
is
tax increases
huge.
on the table for you?
I mean, I don't think so at this point. I think the bigger problem is, and what we should all fear, is what is actually in this budget. We know it's the current budget. We know it's not transparent. We know the outgoing 5 years shows $0 for bridges, $0 for IT, $0 for small business support. They've cut our fleet from 9 million down to 2 million. What are the actual numbers? And we all know that this budget was just a phantom budget to get through an election.
But if you're successful in the primary,
the reality
you still have to live with this budget.
Oh, for this year, yeah.
Whoever wins takes over next year with this budget having gone through.
Well, but then you actually will open up and see what the real numbers are. Like, what is our debt?
But you have to live with that, whatever it is.
Oh, you have to live with it, right?
Takes over in January.
But I couldn't tell you what that number is. Is it 5 million? Is it 50 million? Right now, we don't know because they're not being transparent about any of it. And as we said earlier, if all of a sudden you take all that overtime that they baked in, and you've already gone over it, are they tapping into our reserves this year to fill out that budget? We have no idea what they're doing with our money. And I think coming from the county, seeing it as the controller who, blew the whistle on the debt that was coming for a couple years as the controller, I at least see the county side, seeing what that debt is, knowing what's going to happen with the city just by generally looking at those numbers, that's scary. Because if you're not transparent and you can't fill in your budget gaps this year, where are you getting the money? Are they going to tap into our reserves? We don't know that because they're not telling us the truth. And if you start tapping into your reserves, and I said this at the county level, if you tap into your reserves, it would be like going to your savings account every time you're buying groceries. And that's a scary thought for a lot of people. And that's the way they're managing the city right now.
But however they're managing the city right now, if you're successful and you take over in January, what would you do then?
I think, obviously, I said, looking at the mayor's office and staffing, but then it's also getting a long-term pilot agreement, seeing what debt they've taken on that they shouldn't have taken on, and how do you, renegotiate some of these bonds that they're taking up. And also, the URA took out a loan for the Housing Opportunity Fund, which is great. I voted for the Housing Opportunity Fund, but why is the city paying the URA's debt? I've never heard of that before, ever. The city should not take on additional debt from authorities, but that's what these guys are doing.
Today's show is brought to you by Aura Home. This Mother's Day, don't just tell the moms in your life how much you love them. Share what's going on in your world in a way that can stick with them for years to come. I've got a cousin. She is older than me, kind of an aunt, really, and we haven't lived in the same city in almost 20 years, but I want her to know me and the family that I have found here in Pittsburgh. So she got an Aura frame a while back, and it has fully changed how we talk to each other. So I send her frame pictures of my kid, who she's only met in person like 2 or 3 times, but she knows exactly when he took his first step, what color his favorite cars are, and that when he is up to something, he looks exactly like our grandfather. It keeps us connected in this really special way, and I'm so grateful for it because it has nothing to do with social media. Aura's Carver frame was Wirecutter's #1 pick for a digital photo frame, and you've probably seen it in a bunch of other gift guides. So if you have not gotten one yet, now is the time, because Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day. For a limited time, listeners to this show can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver matte frame. That's Aura, A-U-R-A, frames.com, promo code CityCast. Please support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Today's show is sponsored by the Allegheny County Elections Division and their call out for a very important duty. They want you to be a poll worker in our upcoming primary election. If you are a patriotic sort, maybe someone who gently pressures your friends and family to please go vote, if you're naturally cheery or helpful, if you don't mind a touch of very light paperwork, if you love stickers as a reward for being a good citizen, you can do all this and more, plus your civic duty, by being a paid poll worker. Election Day is May 20th, and poll workers earn between $150 and $175 for the day. And if you're brand new to the gig, you will be trained, plus you get paid for that too. One note, to participate, you must be registered to vote here in Allegheny County. I know we don't have to tell our regular listeners just how important these primaries are. This will very likely be when Pittsburghers, for example, elect the next mayor. So if your time is flexible and you think this might be right for you, learn more and apply at AlleghenyVotes.com.
What sort of promises have you made to yourself this year? Getting in better shape, eating healthier, saving more money, traveling somewhere new? What about discovering a new culture by learning a new language? With Babbel, you can do that in just a few weeks. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by over 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks or whatever pace you choose. And because conversing is the key to really understanding each other in new languages, Babbel is designed using practical, real-world conversations. The Spanish I learned on Babbel really helped me on a recent trip to Mexico City, ordering in restaurants, shopping at the textile market, cheering on at the Lucha Libre, and I've been keeping it up since I got home. You're a podcast listener. I know that because you're listening here. I bet you'll love Babbel's new podcasts. On Eavesdrop in Espanol, which I listen to, you get to listen to a real conversation, then have the teacher host explain back to you. Then you listen again and catch everything. And you can even read along in the transcript. It's a really fun and effective way to learn. Let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting CityCast listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Babbel.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So this is the city's finances. Let's talk about yours as a candidate. How would you describe your financial position going into the final couple months before the election?
Yeah, I mean, I think financially we're in good shape. We've gotten donors large and small, from $25 to a couple $1,000 donors. And we have a lot of unions supporting us, which is very impactful for me because, I've always supported unions and Pittsburgh's a union town. So I think for us, our finances, I believe we have enough money to get through this primary and we're happy about it, but we never stop. I mean, we door knock every day, put out mailers, TV, digital, everything.
What's your response to your Democratic opponent's assertion that you've gotten donations from wealthy people who might influence then how you govern?
Never. I mean, look at my record. People have donated to me all the time. And, the mayor has gotten money from the same individuals that I've gotten money from. What a lot of people don't realize
he says the difference is that they're MAGA. They're Make America Great Again, aligned with Trump, and that
right,
is the
considering
problem.
I'm the Democratic endorsed candidate. I won the Young Democrats endorsement and the Pitt College Dems endorsement and the 14th Ward Democratic endorsement. So I'm the Democratic nominee for this race. And he's taken dollars from the same exact individuals. He's taken them over the last 4 years. And his excuse now is, well, they're MAGA. And it's like, okay, well, let's explain that, Ed. These are people that have given to Josh Shapiro, They've given to the mayor himself. They've given to Chris DeLuzio. They've given to Bob Casey. These are Republican donors within the city of Pittsburgh. However, if he wants to continue to lie about this, let's get to the facts. He is the mayor who wanted to use our tax dollars and welcome Donald Trump and MAGA to host their Republican National Convention in our city. Mayor Gainey wanted to do that. So that was our tax dollars going to put on display every cut that they're doing right now that affects our neighborhoods. Ed Gainey wanted to welcome him here with open arms and use our tax money to bring Donald Trump to Pittsburgh.
What about for this cycle? Have you rejected personally any donations for this primary?
Rejected? Yeah, there's checks we haven't taken. Yes.
What's your reasoning when that happens? Why would a donation get rejected?
When a check comes in, obviously, if somebody does it online, you have to look it up and then return it. But if a check comes in, and we've done it on a number of occasions from, we've seen some slum landlords, some individuals with, bad backgrounds, things like that. So we would not accept them, but I don't have that in front of me right now. But I know we've sent checks back.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the wish list items, some ways that you would like to lead the city. We talked a little bit about police officers and police staffing. To you, what's the right number of officers for the city of Pittsburgh?
Well, the number one thing is the first number that you look at when you're running for mayor is the number one. And the number one is a chief of police.
Yeah.
For you to not have a chief of police and lie to us about a backroom deal that the mayor cut with the prior chief who was refereeing March Madness the last few weeks was a blatant lie to not only city council members, to everybody in the city of Pittsburgh. And that's why he needs to be held accountable for that.
So what will you be looking for in the next year?
A chief of police that actually wants to show up to work.
Do you want internal, external?
I think you have a search. You do not spend money on national searches because we've done that for years, and it's cost the city hundreds of thousands of dollars. But you have a chief that is actually committed to Pittsburgh. The carousel of chiefs that we've gone through shows that they're not only not committed to the city, they're not committed to the leadership in the mayor's office. That's scary. You're putting people's lives at risk, especially officers' lives at risk, who don't know whether they're working 8-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts, 10-hour shifts. They don't know that because there's no leadership in public safety anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked on this show about, kind of what it means to have a mission and to not have a leader to carry through that mission right now. But we didn't talk about the number. How many officers do you think Pittsburgh needs?
Well, right now this is under six, it's 600 something.
Roll call right now is about 600, but that's because some folks are on leave and other
whatever.
things.
Yeah.
We're authorized for 900.
Right. And I think, at one point we had up to 1,000, when I was on council. So I think, for me, it's starting with the chief, but then it's also recruiting and retention. I think if officers see that there's leadership again in the department, they might stay. And I think that's got to be a conversation that you have to have. Right now, there's no leadership at all in this city. And I think that's the problem. And that's why people are leaving to go other places, because they want leadership in their force. They want to know what zone they're going to be operating in. And I also think when you're talking about recruiting, it's investing in officers, it's investing in current and then future officers, but then also looking at data. Data stats are outrageous right now, and they're only reporting half of the stats.
What do you mean? What stats?
So the crime stats. If you look last year, we had almost 1,000 car break-ins, and there was one officer working on car break-ins. That's ridiculous that's our number. But yet, they think everything's great. It's not.
The number that Mayor Gainey talks a lot about is homicides, but there are obviously other forms of crime that we need folks to be focused on.
Yeah, you have burglaries, you have arson, you have break-ins. Those are crimes that happen, vandalism, and the mayor doesn't talk about any of those things. And that's where it's just you're not being transparent with what's actually happening in our streets, and that's a big problem.
Pittsburgh has never, at least in the time that I've been here, had like a simple dashboard or anything like that from the city level that gives me any clarity on what kind of crime is happening in this city. And I started my career as a crime reporter in other cities. It does exist. This technology has been around for a long time.
And you need that technology because, and I will say this, year one, you want to produce every crime stat. So then you actually know what you're measured up against. So for me, yes, you hire a chief that's going to look at the data, that's going to actually produce it for the public so that we can see what's happening in our city. That will actually help you to use your force to deploy them in certain areas at certain times. But if you're not using data, then, you're just struggling and you're not doing a service to the people of Pittsburgh.
When we talk about growth, one question that we're going to put to every candidate is, what do you think about trying to grow the city right now, as we're also looking at our public transit system, talking about changing everything, potentially it's literally closing the doors on a lot of our routes and other things. Do you think that we can grow this community without a thriving public transit system?
No, I mean, you obviously have to work with the transit authority, as I do, as the controller. I wish I had the ability to audit. Not that I'm saying they're doing anything wrong, but it just would give you a better picture from an independent auditor. But authorities, we cannot do. So I think
the transit system is under the auspices of the county, but as mayor, like anyone who sits in the mayor's
I'm
office
answering your
has
question.
to care about transit. Yeah,
right.
That's for our listeners as much as anybody.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So, but for me, yes, it's connectivity. And, can we be creative in that connectivity? If, we have to go up to the state and fight with our friends at the county to save, those transit lines, we have to do that. But we also have to be realistic in then transit-oriented development around the city. If they have to cut lines, and we don't know that that's for sure, but where are those? That's on the table. So where are the most people going to be on which lines? And then you do development around those lines. And that's kind of what the PRT was supposed to be about. And now that you're going to make all of these cuts, possibly, how does that impact us on a daily basis? What are some gaps we can fill in? Again, the universities who have shuttles, are there gaps that they can help fill in? But if you're not bringing everybody to the table to have those conversations about filling those gaps, you're going to struggle. And I think that's, again, the clear difference. You sit in a room and you try to figure out the solution. And yes, it's more county than city, but everything that happens with Port Authority affects us in the city, or not Port Authority now, PRT.
Yeah, PRT. But that's something that if you're successful in the primary, you'd want to be involved in those conversations.
100%. You have to be involved in those conversations. And it's not just people getting to and from work. It's also connecting lines so that kids get to school. Mm-hmm. And we don't see that conversation enough right now. It's getting people around the city, but let's not forget about the kids that need that transfer to get to school on time. And those are cuts that are going to impact a lot of people. So where do you bridge those gaps? How do we work with our schools to then have maybe an additional bus stop, whatever it might be, to help bridge those gaps if the county has to make those cuts?
Do you have any plans to appeal to the state on behalf of our community, just in your current role?
Yes, I mean, I think definitely we're having those conversations right now, and we have to. The PRT is a lifeblood for a lot of people, and we have to use that.
Let's talk a little bit about housing. At a recent candidates forum, you said that you support inclusionary zoning, but that each neighborhood market is different. What do you mean by that?
So I supported inclusionary zoning in Lawrenceville, and it's a tool that we can use.
That's an established program that's been going for 5-6 years now. It's an established program that we voted for when I was on council to establish an inclusionary zoning in that location because the market was overbearing, and, we didn't want people to be displaced in their community. But inclusionary zoning across the city doesn't work. Look at the numbers. It just doesn't. And because every market is part of Mayor Gainey's proposal that it would be mandatory for every neighborhood.
It's mandatory for every neighborhood, but every market is different. And, we have market rate units that can be built without inclusionary zoning. Inclusionary zoning is a tool that you can use on certain locations, but across the city it can't be because we need growth in all of those cities. Most cities that tried inclusionary zoning have shown that it failed. And the mayor, after 4 years, is now proposing a bill that I don't know that it's even going to get past city council.
It made it through the city planning commission, but
council has not approved it, and they've delayed the vote.
Council's been pretty clear they're not going to touch it until the primary.
And they shouldn't, because we know that this was just a political tool. It wasn't an actual policy that you want to fix.
You don't think it was a real policy?
No, a policy would come up when you're actually in the job for a couple of years, not your last year.
You think it's the timing? So it wasn't real because it was in the last year?
If this was a bill that you wanted to have passed because you thought it would impact all these brand new units of affordable housing, which, by the way, his number went from 3,000 to 2,000 to 1,400 to 1,000 units of housing that he built.
I know.
And
he
none of
pointed us
those
to
are
the URA.
true. Yeah, none of them are true. But they go with, well, we kept, I don't even know what his number is now, but it's a lie. He knows he's not building. And also, even take his number on inclusionary zoning. He wants 90% market, 10% affordable. Okay, you're 10% affordable. Let's go to that number. Your goal is 1,000 units a year in the city of Pittsburgh. That was our goal in 2012. So his actual number is to build 100 affordable housing units. That's it. That's not a goal. That's just, again, a political tool that you want to use for the next month. We know that the data doesn't show that this works. And if it did work, why was this not a policy when you started? Why is it a policy that came up 2 months before an election?
Well, it wasn't 2 months before an election. He did propose it at the beginning of last summer.
But you knew you had to go through planning.
I know you
which
have
was
to
going
go
to be
through
a
planning.
6-month process.
That's so jaded. You really think can it not be both? Can it not be both?
No, it's not both.
You propose something that you hope will
when you're
work.
playing games with people's lives like they have been, and you talk about affordable housing, we need 6,000 affordable housing units, not 100 units a year. So let's get real on who can actually produce that when you have no land that's ready to be built on, when you are using the governor's plan to revitalize some units downtown, which is a great idea, but not every building can be gutted downtown for just housing, and we know that.
Yeah, it's a really expensive prospect. There are companies
really
here that have done it
some
well.
that can do it.
But it takes time.
But then you also look at, again, what are his actual numbers? Show me your 3,000 affordable units you built in your 3 years.
He argues
guarantee
that
you,
it's like a combo of like
it's units that have been built over the years.
Yeah, they've already been built.
His.
They've changed them.
So
or
again, they're not his credit. Why does he get credit for that?
Kept them online. They kept them in the affordable column. And then
you don't get credit for not building new units.
Some of the other ones. Yeah. I'm just doing.
I know you're doing your job, but it's kind of funny. You have to admit it's kind of funny.
In line to become affordable, but they're not there yet.
So in 50 years, I'm going to build 500 units. Okay, does he get credit for that? Put my 500 that I just said on his record?
I really want to believe that it can be both, that like our politicians here in town, no matter what office they hold, that they can propose something in an election year and want it to work out, and it also be for political gain. Like it can be both, I hope.
Okay, let's go with that theory then. If you are a political leader, then how come you didn't have votes on city council to pass your agenda or your bill? Because you didn't actually want to work with people to get a bill passed. That's leadership. That's going to council members. And I've done it before. I did it when we passed gun safety laws. I did it when we passed paid sick leave. Those are bills where you work with council members to get a bill that's going to actually pass. You talk about density. You talk about cleaning up the code. You talk about planning. Those are good things. But if you're not an actual leader and working with council members, you don't have a bill. And that's what we're seeing right now. There's no bill. There's a bill that passed the Planning Commission, but there's no bill that's coming in front of City Council because Council is not buying into this bill right now.
Well, so obviously you are not a fan of Mayor Gainey's proposal. There was a competing proposal from Councilman Bob Sharland. He has said since then that there are a couple of things he would like to tweak. It did not pass City Planning Commission. It could still pass Council, but it would take more votes. Sharland is a very vocal supporter of yours. I wonder if you back his inclusionary zoning bill.
So I still think, inclusionary zoning just does not work citywide.
And his wasn't. His was neighborhood by neighborhood.
Right. But I still think every neighborhood and every market is different. So I'd have to compare both bills next to each other. But I also think if you're willing to negotiate, that's where a mayor comes in. So you get a bill that actually works, not a bill for political purposes, that you get a win right before a primary and you didn't even get the win. So, you're not even building affordable units right now. And I think that's where there's no leadership in Pittsburgh anymore. You see press release after press release, but you don't actually see anything happening. And I think that's where people are frustrated, and we deserve better. We deserve a leader that's willing to work with council members, whether they support you or they don't. And besides the zoning bill that was proposed, which isn't going anywhere, what other major initiatives have they proposed?
So what would you propose?
No, not even in zoning. Just what have they proposed?
I'll leave that question for Mayor Gainey. What would your plan be to build
For housing?
More housing, affordable or otherwise?
So if you look at my record, I voted for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That's a tool that can be used. You have tax credits. You have LRTAs. What we should have done was have shovel-ready sites with the COVID relief money that we got so that it's easier to build units.
But we didn't.
So now you have to then start investing in cleaning out our lots, ensuring that community groups and community development groups have the ability to have access to those spaces, whether it's waiving permit fees, waiving, tap-in fees. All of those things build up so that a community organization can actually go out and build more units of development. And that's not what we're seeing. We're not seeing any plan to do any of that right now.
So you're talking about streamlining some of those processes. I ask because, I have a friend, for example, that is very knowledgeable about this stuff, as wonky as you and I, and tried for years to buy the empty lot across the street from his house and couldn't do it.
You have to streamline all of those things. It's permits, it's getting deeds and titles off of vacant lots so that we can sell them to neighborhood groups. So we can even sell a side lot to somebody that wants to cut the grass because they don't want this overgrown grass next to their house.
They wanted to cut the tree down so that they could have the view back.
But it's those basics that we're not investing in those things, but we're out hiring 100 political people. That's where you are not looking at Pittsburgh 10 years from now. You're looking at it as a political game to get reelected. And that's the shame of it, because our city has great bones and structure. That's why I'm excited to do this job. You have the ability to rebuild one of America's greatest cities. You just need a leader at the top to actually push this agenda forward of growth and opportunity, and they just don't do it.
Do you imagine that some of the folks who support you would be a partner in this? I'm thinking, for example, of some of the housing developers that have donated to your campaign.
So the chair of my campaign is an affordable housing developer. And he was instrumental in us building, and nobody said we could do affordable housing in Squirrel Hill, and the gateway to Squirrel Hill are 2 affordable housing buildings. So for me, yes, we're going to rely on individuals, whether they support me or not. There are great people out there that, if they're not supporting me, they still have an open door to come into my office. And I think that's the difference between the two candidates. I'm willing to talk to anybody, whether you supported me or you didn't, because you have an agenda that will help Pittsburgh grow. Right now, we know from this administration, the deputy mayor doesn't return people's phone calls. He said it publicly.
It actually sounded like they took some pride in that.
But wait, you don't take somebody's phone call.
They say they're not beholden to those people because of the way it's always been done.
But regardless, whether you support the mayor or you don't, if you are a community group and you didn't support the mayor, that means the deputy mayor is not going to return your phone call. Good luck getting your garbage picked up, getting your street plowed, getting your street paved. This is a deputy mayor who is not returning people's calls. How do you operate a city? Everybody should have a fair chance to talk to the mayor, whether they support you or they don't. And I think that's why you're struggling.
Previous mayors have published, say, their daily schedules, for example, online.
Yeah, I would publish it in a heartbeat.
Constituents can find them if they want to. That's something you think you might bring back?
I would do day one, because I think people should know what the mayor's up to. You are our taxpayers. I'm supposed to be out there pushing the agenda to help you. You should know what my daily routine is.
Who did you vote for in the most recent presidential election?
Harris.
We're asking everybody.
Okay.
What do you think you would be able to do if you're successful in the primary, because that's when Pittsburgh tends to choose these things, to help Pittsburgh weather some of the federal policy changes that have been happening?
I mean, we have stood up to Trump at all times, whether it's a rally, whether it's making a comment. For me, I think these cuts are hurting our most vulnerable population right now. And that's why, I campaigned against the individual. And I think that's why, we have to band together and see, what would happen if some of these cuts actually go through. How do we have partners at the table from the nonprofits, from the foundation community, to allow us to, tap into their resources so that we can keep jobs, especially when it comes to research and life sciences that we're seeing at Pitt and CMU, and some of those drastic cuts that might come to our universities. So you stand up and you fight, but then, you also never give in. I mean, I think that's one thing that, unfortunately, I was on council when this individual was president last time. So we know that we're not going to see millions of dollars of federal money. So how do we then stretch every dollar in our city to help us expand, to help make sure we get potholes fixed, to help make sure we build new playgrounds? That's why you need somebody that's a watchdog to see where our money's going, not somebody that just puts out phantom budgets all the time.
I mean, what power in your mind does a mayor have to affect change when so much of it's coming at us from on high?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're vocal. You represent a lot of constituents.
You can be loud, but what else can you imagine?
You
maybe
go
doing?
to your congressperson, your state house, your state reps, your state senators, and say, look, we really need this funding. We have to all band together and fight this.
Do you have relationships with a lot of our state leaders in that way?
Yes.
What about at the federal level? Like Senator Fetterman, for example, our new Senator Dave McCormick.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've known John longer. Mm-hmm. I've seen Dave at events, but I think you also have to say, you guys have to really be a fighter for our region, and right now we're not sure where they are on some of these issues, and I think that's concerning to a lot of people, especially when you're talking about not having the ability to form unions. Some of these bills and conversations that they're talking about cutting the federal employees that are union that they're cutting. We need our representatives at the congressional and Senate, seats to start fighting back. And I think that's something that as mayor, you would call on them to do.
Well, let's dream just a little bit. Say someone did hand you a pot of money or you found one somewhere in the budget once you're able to take the look you want. What would you do with a chunk of change for Pittsburgh? What would you want to change first?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's looking at, our neighborhoods, one, cleaning up blight, demoing abandoned houses, cleaning up the garbage that has been rampant nowadays. But also, if you have money, turn on the water fountains. That helps in the summer when we can't turn water fountains on. It's embarrassing.
We did hire a second plumber.
Oh, well, that'll help. Yeah, right. That'll really help. But I think that just shows the just lack of the ability to operate a city. But for me, it's investing in small businesses. It's doing, investments in small business districts. It's demoing sites so that you can build new affordable housing units across Pittsburgh. So yes, if I have money, it's going to go back to the basics. It's going to also buying ambulances. And I can go off a litany of what we would buy, but I think that's where there's no focus anymore. If you give them money right now, they go off and do national studies. We don't need studies. We need money to be invested in people. And the mayor's office just doesn't have the vision right now. And that's why I'm running.
Well, you get a slight advantage here being on the front end of these conversations and how our recording schedule here. What questions would you have for your fellow candidates?
Fellow candidates? Oh, I don't know that I want to ask a question. I think you'll hear my well, I would just say, to my fellow candidates, be truthful and honest with the public. I've known them for a very long time, and, stop lying to our general public. It's not helping your cause. It's not helping Pittsburgh. It's not actually bringing issues that matter to the forefront. And I think that's the frustrating part about what we're seeing right now. Nobody wants to talk about helping Pittsburgh, and that's what we have been focused on. And there's just a lack of that from other candidates in this race.
Final pitch. Why do you think you are the person to be leading Pittsburgh right now?
Yes, I have 11 years experience on city council. I know how to turn water fountains on, if that's your question.
Yeah.
But also 3 years being the county controller, seeing how we can stretch every dollar in this city. And I think, knowing the city as well as I do, where we aren't spending money, we need to focus on. And I think right now we are managing our decline. And I want to talk about growth and opportunity in every neighborhood, and that everybody has a seat at my table if elected mayor. And together we can rebuild one of America's greatest cities. And that's why I'm energetic to do this job. And we will hit the ground running day one with a lot of initiatives we talked about. We're not going to waste taxpayers' time because we're running out of time to grow Pittsburgh. And that's scary for a lot of us. And that's why I'm running.
Corey O'Connor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
that is all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. If you missed our conversation with Mayor Ed Gainey about why he wants 4 more years in office, we published that last Monday, so please go back and take a listen. And stay tuned over the next couple of weeks to hear from our Republican candidates, former police officer Tony Moreno and Lawrenceville small business owner Thomas West. One more reminder, the primary election is May 20th, and you have to be registered by May 5th if you're going to vote. We will be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. We'll talk to you soon. Have you seen the flyer that Gainey is circulating? They say it's very popular in the 14th Ward.
Oh, is it? Yeah, that's why I won the 14th Ward Independent Club endorsement.
Hey CityCast, it's your host Megan Harris popping in to tell you about our new CityCast Pittsburgh Neighbors program. I know you've heard us talk about membership before, and many of you are already part of it. Thank you. Well, we've got a new name. We're calling it CityCast Pittsburgh Neighbors because we've heard that people who support CityCast Pittsburgh are people who care deeply about the city and want to make it better. They're just the kind of neighbors the city needs. We're also adding benefits. CityCast Pittsburgh Neighbors still have access to ad-free podcast listening and an exclusive weekly local events preview. But now you can also get regular events like happy hours with other CityCast Pittsburgh neighbors, local volunteering meetups, and other members-only events where we explore and better our city together. And you get to shout out a local business or nonprofit you love on the show and in the Hey Pittsburgh newsletter. For $10 a month, you can become a CityCast Pittsburgh neighbor today by going to membership.citycast.fm. That's membership.citycast.fm. We could not make this show without folks like you supporting it, and we are really excited for you to be a part of it.